I'm living proof that it doesn't really matter where or how you start. It's how you finish. I am the American dream. My name is Trixy Castro. I'm a serial entrepreneur. You name it, I've done it, from raising and investing well over $20 billion in the form of debt and equity in real estate, to creating my first company with a phone and a desk, later selling it to Goldman Sachs, second company to Fidelity national title, have invested in well over 55 other entrepreneurs. That's one of the greatest joys I've had, to see their dreams come to life and see that, hey, what I went through can be helpful to you. My story starts with my family, who came to this country in search for a better life, for opportunity, having seen how hard my parents worked and what they went through to create opportunities for my siblings and I has always been a driving force for me. I grew up in another family's guest house. From the ages of 3 to 14, we lived in their property and worked as the housekeepers. That's really where my journey began, having that exposure. We moved to our first home when I was 14 years old. I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna make friends. I'm gonna go try out for soccer and cheer. Lo and behold, I make both, and I'm super excited until they explained to me, well, each sport is $1,000. I knew we didn't have $2,000. Are you kidding? That was like winning the lottery. All right, let me make it. And I took my younger sister's Crayola magic markers, made my business cards, and I made my first company called Trixie's Tutor Time. And within 30 days, I was making more cash under the table than both my parents combined. Where there's a will, there's a way. Now, let me really understand how money works. So I walk into a Wells Fargo branch and I asked them for a job. I said, listen, I will do whatever it takes. I just want to learn. And she hires me on the spot. So I get to be a teller. I was probably the world's worst teller because I was so fascinated with speaking to the highest depositors and understanding how they made their money. So I thought, okay, I'm going to understand this real estate. So I asked these groups, I said, hey, listen, when you buy your real estate, how do you do it? How do you get leverage? And that was a foreign concept. It hadn't really been done in a sophisticated way. And I thought, this is incredible. This is what I want to go do. I'm going to go build that piece of it. So somehow I get a meeting with the CEO at the time of Wells Fargo. And I'm so excited to go, and I'm going to meet with him and I'm going to pitch him this, and I'm going to explain to him that we, Wells Fargo, we need to expand and do these what are today B2B loans. And he thinks that I'm there to babysit his kids. And I'm like, well, no, I'm actually your meeting, right? And thinking back as an adult now, I'm shocked that he even let me pitch him, but I'm so grateful. What he said was probably along the lines of, this is great. However, what I heard was, that's great, go build your bank. So I did, and I put in the work, and I wanted to understand the industry. I wanted to understand every single piece of this space so that I could create a bank specific for this niche. I could get to know these borrowers and understand their business better than they did. So for 5 years, I tested it. I didn't know high net worth individuals. I didn't have access to private money, hedge funds, Wall Street, none of that. I would go to a deli, have my deals, and I would analyze them. I would drive the property. I would know the appraisal by heart, and I would just talk to people sitting there having lunch. Do you invest in real estate? Let's look at it. I came up with the name, Genesis Capital, the origin, the birth of something new, because this was something new to me, the beginning of something really special. And here I am, a phone, a desk, and me. That's it. I have so much business because, these groups are doing so many of these. I have to make sure that I can deliver, put the dream team together, go out and really understand these borrowers. As I scaled the company, I realized I couldn't keep up with my demand. I needed to go out and raise real money. The first woman that actually invested $500,000 in me, I was so naive in business. I didn't keep any of that money for operating capital or OpEx. That went entirely into doing loans. How do I create an environment where I can solve for that problem, but also give them what they need? And I'll never forget, I was driving to one of the properties that we were gonna lend money on, and I start talking to the neighbors. And they said, we are original owners. We did everything right, but because of where we are in the downturn, because of where the market is today, these houses are now filled with crime and gangs and horrible things. I kept thinking, how do I solve this problem and bring these communities back? And how do I solve the problem for my borrowers because they need more inventory? There has to be a way. That's how I taught myself how to work backwards in the deal and created a company called Genesis Auctions, which later became Hudson Marshall. I was so excited. So now I have two companies, right? I have Genesis Capital, I have Genesis Auctions. I don't have the capital to keep up with the demand. I'm paying for a lot of this on credit cards. I had two options, either go raise money or cut expenses. At the time, all I was seeing was cut expenses. I'll never forget having to ask Brittany to meet me for lunch at Corner Bakery and tell her, let me help you find another job. I get emotional thinking about it. And you know, on the drive there, I said, absolutely not, I'm not doing it. I'm gonna go figure out how to raise the money. That is what prompted me to go to Wall Street. I didn't have a single meeting lined up. I didn't know a single person in New York City. But what I knew was that I wasn't coming home empty-handed. So I walked into the bar and I started talking to people and giving out my business card. And all of a sudden, I get the first meeting. 3 days later, I'd raised my first $30 million of institutional money. That's the day that I knew this could, in fact, become what I had envisioned and dreamt of. It could become a real thing. Come back, scale the companies, go back to Wells Fargo, say, hey guys, can you help me raise money? We get Oak Tree Capital to give us the first $250 million in equity. I was so excited, but I knew I was going to blow through that in 15 seconds, right? I knew what my demand was and I knew what it could be. So I realized that I have an opportunity to really scale this and make this something unique, but I needed to get there faster. You see, in the auction space, you had to go and get statements of work from the banks, and I was struggling with that. And there was a big, large bank that I had worked for a year to try and get them to sign, but they would never sign. What am I not doing? I know I'm doing all the things, and I know that my execution is better than my competitor. So what can it possibly be? And it dawned on me one day, you know, sometimes it's not a level playing field. Could it be that I'm not what they're used to? I decided that I was going to test it. So I went to one of my borrowers at the time, can you just come with me? And, you know, he looked like what they were used to. He spoke the way they were used to. They signed within 45 minutes. So now these companies are growing and growing, and the team's getting bigger. Cold called a competitor and said, hey, let's meet. We joined forces, i.e. Hudson and Marshall, turned around and sold that company 2 years later. 9 months after that, closed the deal with Goldman Sachs on Genesis Capital. Selling my companies was amazing, and I'm so grateful for those opportunities, being able to reflect back and realize that when it got tough, to be able to dig deep and remember my why and my vision was what got me through it. You have to remember where your fire comes from. Go out and become a force. You just figure it out as you go. You need to continue to grow your business, but you need to grow yourself. If you have solid business practices and you know who you are and you have a vision and you align yourself with good people, people that are better than you, that is a recipe for a win. The sky's the limit.